Hello again, this is Alister McGrath introducing another short talk on issues in science and religion. And you'll remember in the previous talk I spoke about Isaac Newton's idea of a regular ordered universe, similar in some ways to a mechanical clock, even though Newton himself didn't really develop a mechanical view of the universe. Now, mechanism implies regularity, which implies law-likeness. And as Peter Harrison and other historians pointed out, leading scientists of this period came to believe in a mechanical universe that was governed by the laws of nature. It's a very famous idea, the idea of the laws of nature expressing this regularity, and God, of course, being seen as the divine lawgiver. But this raises a very interesting question that's been widely discussed. Is there any room in this mechanistic view of the world for the religious idea of a miracle? If the universe is governed by the laws of nature, is there any place for miracles? So let's begin our reflections by noting Peter Harrison's point that most scientists of Newton's age believed in an omnipotent God who intervened in the natural order from time to time to achieve some special purpose, and thus be able to set aside those laws of nature in doing so. And leading scientists of this age didn't actually see this as being problematic or contradictory, because it was seen as fitting in with a broader view of God's overall purposes within nature. For example, the natural philosopher Robert Boyle wrote that while God established laws of nature, yet, and I quote, "He has not bound up his own hands by them, but can invigorate, suspend, overrule, and reverse any of them as he thinks fit." And Newton himself took the view that a given event might seem miraculous to one observer, but natural to another, depending upon the state of knowledge of the observer. Now, the phrase "the laws of nature" was not widely used before about 1650, although it is frequently encountered after this date. And this historical point is actually more important than many realize, in that modern discussions of miracles, which date from after 1650, are almost invariably framed in terms of miracles as the violations of the laws of nature. And we find this phrase especially in the Scottish philosopher David Hume's 1748 critique of miracles. And for Hume, a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature, or, and I quote, "a transgression of a law of nature by the particular volition of the deity." And this seems to echo the views of the Dutch rationalist philosopher Spinoza, who treated the laws of nature as absolute and necessary philosophical principles, whereas, of course, many others just saw them as summaries of observations. They're just an enumeration of what you observe in the natural world. And as Hume himself pointed out, and I think this is a very important point, inductive generalizations are necessarily incomplete. And for that reason, they cannot be regarded as proved or universal or necessary. So the interesting point here is that Hume's definition of miracle actually means that few, if any, would have believed in a miracle for the first 1600 years of Christian history. Why? Because the idea of the absolute laws of nature was not known or accepted before about 1650. So if we go back to the 13th century, you find Thomas Aquinas writing of miracles as things that surpass the capabilities of nature. There's no mention here of a violation of the laws of nature. For Aquinas, miracles are events that transcend the productive power of nature. It's a very important point. So clearly, your thinking about miracles is going to depend a lot on how you understand this idea of the laws of nature. Now, some see these as principles embedded in the structure of the universe, but others suggest they're simply generalizations about the patterns observed in nature. They are descriptive, not legislative. So Hume's definition of miracles does remain influential, but actually it is also problematic. Now, many people would say, well, actually, this is what a law of nature is, and therefore Hume is basically telling things the way they are. For example, the physicist Paul Davies holds that laws of nature are embedded within the universe, leading him to strongly support the Platonic idea that the laws are out there, transcending the physical universe. Yet we do need to pause here and note that the advance of science inevitably entails the review and sometimes the rejection of what previous generations regarded as being firmly established. And this point is made repeatedly by writers who are aware of the danger of becoming locked into what a specific theological generation regarded as self-evidently correct assumptions about the natural world. And miracles might seem to many at present to be inconsistent with natural sciences, but that judgment might rest on our present-day knowledge of our universe. Now, the British philosopher of religion, F.R. Tennant, made this important point in his book Miracle and Its Philosophical Presuppositions. Now, listen to this. Until we shall have arrived at something like omniscience as to nature's constitution and intrinsic capacities, we cannot affirm any marvel to be beyond them. Now, that's a very important point, I think. Science is on the journey. It hasn't finished that journey yet, and we don't know where it's going to end up. So we need to be careful here. So we've looked at the scientific and philosophical issues related to miracles. I think it's fair to turn now and think about their religious significance, because many people do not see miracles primarily, to use Hume's terms, as violation of the laws of nature. Rather, they see them as signs of God's presence or activity. And the British theologian Keith Ward made this point in his important 1990 book, Divine Action. And Ward here critiques Hume's inflated understanding of a law of nature and his apparent exclusion of God's ultimate reason for creating the universe in the first place. So, Ward invites us to think like this. Supposing God intends that human beings can come to know and love God and enjoy being in God's presence, then, if this is what God wants, surely this goal is going to be built into the causal structures of the universe. What happens to help bring about this goal is thus not a violation of the laws of nature, but actually amounts to their fulfillment. For Ward, miracles show that nature is not to be considered as a closed physical system. And Ward thus locates his discussion of miracles in the context of the changing understanding of the universe arising from contemporary science, which in effect is moving away from the idea of a closed system. For Ward, the universe is a much looser, a much more open system than a deterministic Newtonian worldview allows. Now, there's much more that needs to be said here, but it gives you a beginning for your reflections. You can move on from here and take this further. But let's move on now to the next presentation, in which I'm going to reflect with you on the related question of how God can be said to act in the world. So I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Thank you so much for listening.